I think of different angles I can look at the house from and create a good shape from that. Many houses in Minecraft are built in many different shapes and sizes. This one, for example, uses lots of round shapes and different boxes to create its unique look. This one, however, is much more boxy, which fits its modern downtown vibe. From all sorts of different houses, you can see how they might use different shapes to create a unique experience, like this one here, or this skyscraper right here, which uses more boxy at the bottom and an office tower on top, or this one, or how about this cyberpunk city stadium, which I'm working on currently. Here's some more cyberpunk buildings. There is also this cyberpunk city, which uses all sorts of different shapes, and you can see just how many different shapes and decorations and different block types I used in order to create a unique building with many unique experiences inside. So here you can see, as I'm showing you through the town, just how many different types of buildings you can make in Minecraft, and some of them are very unique in the way they look, and I'm going to be teaching you exactly how to build these sorts of unique buildings. Now here's one unique one I made that I think shows off just the importance of shape, which is what we're going to be talking about today in this video. This is a Nordic Minecraft house, which also has a modern aesthetic also built on top of it, which is the bottom section where you can see that kind of boxy area. That's kind of the modern aesthetic, and I also made some glass windows, but here you can see how just this one shape can help turn this Nordic house from just being a standard Viking looking house to a more modern one. And you can see on the top, I actually made it in the shape of a cross, because many buildings of this era were made in the shape of a cross, like churches, for example, as well as some Nordic structures after they became Christians in the 800s. So this is a great example of such a type of house, which utilizes the more Viking elements at the top and the modern elements at the bottom. So we're going to be talking about shape and size today, and this is just the first of my many tutorials. So I started out with this little basic wood block, and I think you've probably seen many videos which might show you something like this, where they kind of just add on random shapes to the outside until they kind of get something they like, which is not a bad way necessarily of building, but I want to try to do something a little bit different than this. I want us to really be thinking about one aspect of shape in particular in our video, which is angles. So I really want us to focus on angles and making a good angle which we can look at the house from, because that's kind of how I build, is I think of different angles I can look at the house from and create a good shape from that. So the most important angle is probably the one that the player is going to see the most, which is usually the front. It's not always, but it's usually the front. So I think trying to come up with a good angle for the front and what that'll look like is pretty important. So we have this basic square here, but let's add on something to make it a little more interesting. So we can see I'm adding on just another square to the side, and now we have four sides of the house to look at when you're just looking at it from that one side. But when I look at it from a different angle, it kind of changes how many sides of the house I can see. So I'm trying to experiment a little bit to see if I can create more sides to see, because I like seeing multiple faces of a house. So I can create more faces by changing the shape of the house. So that's kind of what I'm trying to talk to you about. Is we could just add things randomly, but it's more important to think, how can I change things to make the angle look a little bit better? Like, I want to see more faces of the house. So see, now I added a little rounded feature on the side there on the left. That rounded feature, I think, will kind of smooth the build on the side and give it a better shape. So I'm kind of experimenting with different shapes and adding parts of shapes. But you can see I haven't really made anything too complex. I have a bit of a half a circle, a square, and then another square attached to it. So nothing too crazy here. It's rather simple, in fact. So another thing I want to talk to you about is adding shape on top of shape. So another interesting thing you can do here is what I'm doing right now, which is I want another angle on top of my house, but I don't want it on the first floor, so I'm going to add it on the second floor. This is important to think about when you're building a house. Also want to think about scale. We're not really going to talk about scale in this video, but just so you guys know, I would very much recommend you start building on a really small scale at first, because it's really easy to think, oh, I'm going to build this huge house that's going to be amazing, but you get about halfway through it and you'll never complete it. So it's a bit easier if you start on a smaller scale. So you can see this house here is not that big. It's pretty small. I was able to finish it within about an hour, actually, of building. Most of it building by hand with no commands. In fact, I don't think I used any commands for this particular house, even though I do sometimes use commands for my bigger builds. But you can see here that now I have two shapes, and now I added a little rectangle on top. I'm going to connect the two, of course, but I'm just kind of experimenting to see how I want the top and the bottom to connect to each other, and we're going to see how this plays out. But really think about that. See how think about the angles I'm creating here. See, well, right now I'm just breaking the ground, but when I look back at the house, look at the angles I'm creating. I'm breaking that to extend this part out here to create kind of a carport that you can drive under. Not that there's cars, but just you can see here I extended that out. Now we have an angle on top and an angle on the bottom, and you can see that by creating sort of a slant from the bottom to the top, it kind of gives the building a bit of an upward mobility, which is this idea of like it's lifting itself upwards. It kind of feels like that when you look at it. So that's something you can think of when you're building angles. So here we have the house at a bit of a later stage, and you can see where that upward mobility really pays off. Now I have a lot more of an interesting to look at house, and all I have is just a big L on top of my square that I've kind of made a few shape modifications to. So think of all the different shapes you can add, like triangles, squares, circles. Now see, I've added a triangle as well. And now this house I'm building here is pretty interesting. I decided to build it completely out of oak blocks, or blocks that can be created from oak, that is. So nothing besides that, which I think creates a pretty interesting house. I'm trying to basically show you that just through shape alone you can create an interesting house without having that many block types, because I think I was working with maybe about 9 or 10 block types with oak. There's not a whole lot to work with, and especially color, you can't do a whole lot. You can do quite a bit of detail, and we will get into shape detail, which is basically creating smaller shapes on a smaller level, detailing the house with the different slabs and the stairs and the like, which you can see I'm doing on this house. We're not going to get too much into how to do that today. I just want us focusing on creating the shapes, the big shapes of the house, just the frame essentially. And you can see I made this big triangle frame, which I'm working on right now on the top, because I felt like that left side needed something that kind of poked up towards the sky. So I wanted the angle to kind of direct my eyes up towards the sky once I looked at it from that. And I really like this angle right here on this side of the house. I really like that. It's not the front, but it's another great viewing angle of the house, which you can enjoy a good view of it. I try to make my houses look as good from as many possible angles as possible. Well, so try to think of that too. Maybe it looks good from just the front, but then from the back it's just this flat wall. Well, probably not too nice to look at a flat wall, and in certain circumstances that fits perfectly fine, but maybe consider not putting a flat wall, but doing something like I did here. From pretty much every single angle of this house, from any viewing angle. And again, viewing angles is really what you want to think. Where is the player going to look at this from? How can I make that more interesting? Can I add a wall? Can I bend it inwards? Can I bend it outwards? Can I add a flat piece that extends out like a porch? You know, there's all these different things. And another great thing you can do to learn. And again, we're trying to learn how to build, not just learn a step-by-step how to build, but learn how to have the tools to make my own buildings on the fly. I came up with this building while I was building it. I didn't draw it out beforehand. Now, I do oftentimes draw beforehand, but as I've gotten better, I oftentimes now just start building until I get something I really like. And of course I make mistakes and I have to break things here or there, but usually they're nothing too huge now, and I end up liking whatever I come up with on the fly. And I do this by thinking, hey, what's going to look here good from this angle? What's going to look good from this angle? What's going to look good from this angle? And then I start making little tweaks here and there until I get a shape I really like. And once I have the shape, it's just about detailing and stuff like that, and that's not hard. The shape is honestly the most important part. Once you get that down, you can learn how to do the detailing, but the shape is not necessarily something you learn in the same way that you do detailing. You just learn detailing kind of over time by looking different houses up and finding out details, and which I highly recommend. Go look at other videos besides this one, or my videos on details when it comes out. But really, shape is what's really important. Is figuring out what's going to look good. I like to do a lot of natural elements too. And what I mean by natural elements is thinking about my surrounding. Now with this house I didn't think about my surrounding as much, but thinking about what the sun does. Where do I want light to come into my house? The position of the sun. I did not face this house in a particular direction towards the sun, although I will say that the sun faces the front of the house in the morning, which I figured out when I was taking pictures. So that's something that's kind of nice, because I like how the sun brings a lot of light in through that front-facing window, which you'll see me build on the triangle in a little bit, and then also on the back-facing window during the evening, which is pretty nice. But then during the midday, you kind of get some shade from the whole house, but it comes in through that top porch section, which has a little hole in the top. So that's a great example of thinking of light. And again, we'll talk about location and atmosphere and light, which is important for your shape too, but so I just wanted to mention it here. However, shape is really what I wanted to be talking about. See that rounded section, how it really smooths that edge. Now, what do you think I would add here to make it better? Because I do add something else, because I'm not quite satisfied with this shape. Well, the area I'm not satisfied with is the top left. So you can see here I added a little extension on that top left on the other side. And you can see here, this is kind of the finished product. I don't have the inside built, and I do use non-oak blocks on the inside, because I think an interior with just oak blocks would be horrible, because there's no, beds or anything like that. But for the most part, I think on the outside you can do a really nice house with just oak blocks, and you can see how I like it from different angles. But yeah, there's that little extrusion that I added to the top of the circular area, and it doesn't look the best from that angle, but I think it really looks good from the front, which again is to me the most important angle, and it doesn't look too bad from the side there. So I really like how this ended up. I think it has a really great shape to it. So that's really what I want you guys to focus on. Try building houses which utilize shapes on the first floor, on the second floor. Take some squares, some triangles, some circles. Get your viewing angles, where you think the player is going to view from it, from the front, from the sides, as I like to do, especially 45-degree angles. I love viewing from those angles in particular, because I think they create cool shots, especially if you have a front-facing house like this one. Think about where you're viewing your house from. Think about those shapes and start building. So take some squares, some triangles, and work it out until you get something you like. And it's going to take a little longer for you to pick it up at first, but once you kind of get to understand it, you'll be able to create a good shape. And I would start with just building frames. Don't worry about all the details. Don't worry about all those things. Just build some frames, take some logs like I did, and just start building like I did at the beginning of this build until you get a shape you like. And once you get that, you can start focusing, okay, let me do details, okay, let me do that. And there'll be other tutorials that I make, and there are other tutorials out there which can explain how to do that. But this is just the first one, which is obviously shape. So be sure to check out new videos by liking and subscribing. There'll be lots of new content. Every week I'll try to post another updated tutorial with new videos on new content. So be sure to like to subscribe and comment down below. If you like this video, please leave a comment. Thank you for watching as always.